Hello everyone. I just wanted to make a quick video as I just noticed that Sony have released version 6 firmware for the FX3, which includes the much requested shutter angle feature. I thought it might be useful to download and install the firmware on camera so that I can bring you along for the ride. Hopefully it will all go well. If not, at least I'll have some evidence to show what went wrong. So let's start by visiting the Sony website. Here I'm on the Sony UK website, and I'll post a link in the description to where I'm downloading from. But depending on where you are in the world, you may need to visit a Sony website that suits your location. So first of all, it's warning that there's different ways to update depending on which firmware version you currently have installed. Now, I'm not going to go through all of this now, but you should definitely read it as it's important to choose the right version. I currently have firmware version 5 installed, so I'm going to proceed to the download page for version 6. The download page shows a list of changes with version 6, starting with the much anticipated shutter angle. There's also a few other new features in here too. It allows you to add flags to clips, either during or after recording. It says it improves the quality when using 3D LUTs, which is interesting and something I'll need to look into. It also adds a 709 tone color mode if you're using picture profiles. And apparently the camera can now prompt you when there's a software update available too. There's a whole bunch of improvements for those that transfer photos and videos to a smartphone using the Sony Creators app. That's not something I've used, but it sounds good for those of you that do. There's also some improvements if you use the Monitor and Control app. I plan to look more into that in the future, as again, it's not something I've tried yet. It looks like they've added the ability to use a USB cable instead of connecting wirelessly, which could be useful. They've also added clip review during playback mode, focus map display, something called iris operation bar, and the choice of shutter speed or shutter angle in the Monitor and Control app as well. Again, I'm not going to be looking at all that in this video, we're just going to focus on the shutter angle for now. There's a bunch of instructions at the bottom of the page, and I urge you to read these before proceeding. I've already looked at this, so I'm going to go ahead and start the download. The file downloaded is called bodydata.dat. I'm going to drag that onto the root of one of my FX3's cards. With that done, I'll eject the card and we're ready to go. Okay, so I've got my FX3 set up here and I'll just pop the card in. So we start by going into the menu and then scroll all the way to the suitcase menu at the bottom. From here we go across and then again all the way down to the setup option at the bottom. From here we go across again and scroll down until you see version. Press right on that and you'll see the current firmware version. And if everything is correct, you should see the option to start the software update. Once that's pressed, you get a final set of instructions telling you that you mustn't power off the camera or remove the memory card during the update. It also tells you that the screen will be blank, but a small LED on the back of the camera will blink to show various stages during the update. Finally, it says the camera should reboot once the process is complete. Okay, so fingers crossed, let's press execute. I'm going to speed up this part of the video as watching a blinking LED isn't going to be much fun, but just so you know, this part took just over 3 minutes to complete with my camera. You can see that the small red LED starts to flash more as it progresses, with the final stage showing 5 flashes. Well, that's a relief. The camera seems to have survived and it's rebooted. So let's press OK and it looks the same. First, I'll just check the version is updated as expected. That's interesting. This page has changed slightly and it now shows different options for the body and the lens. I'll click body and yes, it appears we're on version 6 now. We're still seeing shutter speed though, so let's see if we can change that to shutter angle. So I'll go into the menu and then go up to exposure and then across and you see the new shutter mode option. It's currently set to speed, so let's go in and change that to angle. With that done, I'll exit the menu and we can now see that we're using a 180-degree shutter angle instead of showing the shutter speed. Turning the dial on the back cycles through the available shutter angles. We don't seem to have the fully variable shutter angle that many of us were hoping for though. The options still jump between random amounts rather than offering fine adjustments, which means it's likely still limited to stops in the same way the shutter speed is as well. If you don't understand shutter angle, then I did make a video about that a while back, so I'll pop a link to that on the screen and down in the description. Essentially though, this doesn't really change much other than it will automatically keep the shutter speed at a relative setting to the frame rate, so you don't need to manually change shutter speed when you change frame rate if you want to maintain that same relative setting. Interestingly, if you scroll past the limits of the shutter angle, the camera then goes into the combined frames modes. These appear to increase exposure, but what they're actually doing is reducing the frame rate and then duplicating frames in order to increase exposure time. Anyway, going back to the shutter angles, let's go back to 180 degrees. Now I'll go in and change my frame rate from 25 to 50. I'll use the function menu for this, and you'll see that when I select 50, the exposure drops because the camera has automatically changed the shutter speed to follow the defined 180 degree angle. And likewise, if I change back to 25 frames per second, you'll see the exposure increase as the camera automatically adjusts the shutter speed back accordingly. You can of course also view and change the shutter angle using the quick menus. I'll do that here by going to menu 1 and then selecting the shutter angle. From here I can change the shutter angle using the up and down options on the dial. In summary, I think having shutter angle will please a lot of people, just because it's a typical cinema camera feature that will help with matching other cameras in use. It's a shame it's not fully variable, and personally it doesn't make a whole lot of difference for me. In fact, quite often if I switch from 25 frames per second to 50 frames per second in order to use my footage for slow motion, I don't actually want to maintain that 180 degree shutter angle. I won't go into why that is now, but watch the video shown on the screen if you're interested. I hope you found that video useful. Let me know what you think in the comments. Do you prefer using shutter angle, or doesn't it make a whole lot of difference to you? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.